The air inside Studio 4 was not merely hot. It was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket woven from the heat of 200 tungsten lights and the nervous energy of a production that was already 3 weeks behind schedule. To the uninitiated, the set of The Gilded Cage was a marvel of Victorian opulence, a sprawling recreation of a 19th-century ballroom complete with crystal chandeliers that shimmered like frozen tears and velvet drapes the color of dried blood. But to Leo Vance, standing in the shadows of a faux marble pillar, it was just a factory where dreams were manufactured on an assembly line, and where he was currently serving as a very small, very insignificant cog. Leo adjusted the rough collar of his costume. It scratched against his neck, a constant, irritating reminder of his station. He was playing footman number 3, a role that didn't even warrant a name in the script, merely a function. Open door, look invisible, exit stage left. While the lead actors were swathed in custom silk and breathable cotton blends, the background talent was encased in stiff polyester blends that trapped sweat and smelled faintly of the previous wearer's desperation. But Leo didn't complain. He didn't shift his weight or check his phone like the extras huddled by the craft services table. He stood perfectly still, his posture slumped just enough to suggest a lifetime of servitude, his eyes downcast but observant. He was working. He was always working. Cut. Reset. Checking the gate. The voice of Elena, the director, cut through the humid air like a whip crack. She was a small woman with a presence that filled the cavernous soundstage, her eyes permanently narrowed behind thick-rimmed glasses as she scanned the monitors. Leo watched her rub her temples. A gesture of fatigue she tried to hide from the producers hovering near the video village. They were the sharks circling the water, suits that cost more than Leo's car, checking their watches and whispering about overages. The tension on set was palpable, a vibrating string waiting to snap. And the man holding the scissors was currently getting his nose powdered in the center of the room. Chase Sterling. The name alone was a brand, a promise of box office returns and teenage heartthrobs. He stood in the middle of the ballroom floor, the undisputed sun around which this entire chaotic solar system revolved. Chase was undeniably handsome, possessing the kind of symmetrical jawline and piercing blue eyes that seemed to have been engineered in a laboratory for the express purpose of selling tickets. He was wearing a tuxedo with tails, the fabric crisp and immaculate, fitting him like a second skin. 3 makeup artists fluttered around him like hummingbirds, dabbing at imaginary imperfections, adjusting a stray lock of golden hair, offering him a straw to sip his alkaline water so as not to smudge his lips. Leo watched the spectacle from his periphery. He had studied Chase for weeks now, not with envy, though the pay gap was a chasm one could lose a soul in, but with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a volatile chemical reaction. On the surface, Chase was the consummate professional, laughing at the assistant director's jokes, flashing that million-dollar smile at the script supervisor. But Leo saw the tremors. He saw the way Chase's left hand, the one hidden behind the velvet coattails, was clenching and unclenching in a rhythmic spasm. He saw the sheen of sweat that wasn't from the lights, a cold, clammy perspiration that spoke of a deep, internal rot. Chase Sterling was a man standing on a precipice, and he was terrified of looking down. Positions, everyone. We are going for the confrontation scene. Take 14. And please, people, can we get the lighting cue right this time? I don't want shadows on the merchandise. The merchandise wasn't Chase. It was the necklace. A hush fell over the set as Jim, the prop master, walked onto the floor. He carried a velvet-lined case with the reverence of a priest carrying a holy relic. The set went silent, the usual murmur of grips and electrics dying out instantly. Jim placed the case on the antique vanity table in the center of the set and clicked the latch open. Even from 20 feet away, Leo saw the flash. The heart of the sea. A cascade of diamonds and sapphires that seemed to drink the studio lights and spit them back out as cold fire. It was on loan from a private museum, accompanied by 2 armed guards who stood just out of the camera's frame, their eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the indoor gloom. "All right, settle down," Elena called out, her voice tight. "Chase, this is the moment. You've just realized she's leaving you. You see the necklace, the symbol of your betrayal. I need anger, Chase. I need fire. Not this lukewarm TV drama pout you've been giving me for the last hour. Action. The clapperboard snapped shut. Scene 45, take 14. Leo held his breath, merging into the scenery. The camera dolly pushed in smoothly on its tracks. Chase stepped into the light. For a second, he looked the part, regal, wounded, dangerous. He reached for the necklace, his fingers hovering over the diamonds. You think this? Chase began, his voice projecting well. You think this trinket can buy your freedom? He paused. The line was supposed to continue. The silence stretched, turning awkward. Chase blinked, the intensity draining from his face like water from a cracked cup. He looked confused, his eyes darting to the side where the cue cards were hidden. Cut! Elena screamed, throwing her script onto the floor. Sorry. Chase held up his hands, his charm switching back on instantly, though it looked brittle now. I got distracted. There was a reflection. Can we fix that gel on the key light? It's blinding me. It was a lie. Leo knew it. The lighting was perfect. The gaffer had spent 2 hours tweaking it. Chase had forgotten his lines. Again. Reset! The assistant director bellowed, his patience wearing thin. As the crew scrambled to reset the scene, Leo saw Chase turn away from the camera. The smile dropped, the handsome face contorted into a mask of sheer panic. Chase reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, checking it furtively. His thumbs flew across the screen, his posture hunched. It wasn't the behavior of a bored actor checking Instagram. It was the desperation of a man waiting for a lifeline. Leo shifted slightly, the leather of his cheap boot squeaking against the floor. Chase's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Leo's. For a moment, the two men stared at each other across the expanse of the fake ballroom, the star and the shadow. In that brief exchange, Leo saw something that chilled him more than the studio's air conditioning. He saw recognition. Not that Chase knew Leo's name or respected his work, but that Chase recognized a witness. He knew that Leo was the only one paying attention to the cracks in the armor, the only one who wasn't blinded by the glare of the celebrity. Chase's eyes narrowed, a flash of malice replacing the panic, before he smoothed his expression back into the benign mask of the protagonist. Let's go again, Chase shouted, clapping his hands with forced enthusiasm. I've got it this time. I feel it. They went again, and again. Take 15 was ruined by a boom mic dipping into the frame. Take 16 was technically perfect, but Chase's delivery was flat, devoid of the soul required to sell the tragedy. Take 17 was stopped because the leading lady, a seasoned theater actress named Isabella who had the patience of a saint, finally snapped and asked Chase to stop stepping on her dress. By the time the lunch bell finally rang, the atmosphere on set was toxic. The crew moved with the heavy, silent aggression of people who were overworked and underappreciated. The armed guard stepped forward immediately to secure the necklace, locking the case and preparing to transport it to the on-set safe, a ritual they performed with military precision. 1 hour, everyone. Back in 1 hour, the AD announced. The studio doors opened, flooding the dark set with the harsh, blinding reality of the California midday sun. The illusion broke. The Victorian ballroom became just painted plywood and styrofoam again. The cast and crew streamed out towards the catering trucks, a river of hungry, grumbling bodies. Leo didn't move immediately. He watched Chase Sterling. The star didn't head for the food. He didn't go to his co-stars to apologize for the delays. Instead, Chase practically ran towards the VIP exit, his phone already pressed to his ear, his knuckles white as he gripped the device. He looked like a man running from a fire that only he could see. Leo sighed, the sound lost in the noise of the departing crowd. He felt a strange heaviness in his gut, an intuition honed by years of playing victims, villains, and bystanders. The drama they were filming was titled The Gilded Cage, a story about people trapped by their own wealth and lies. But as Leo watched the golden boy of Hollywood disappear into the shadows of the hallway, he had the sinking feeling that the real story was happening off camera, and the ending wasn't going to be a happy one. He looked down at his own hands, stained with the fake dirt of his character. He needed to fix the sole of his boot. It had started flapping during the last few takes. He could go to the costume department, but they would just yell at him for damaging assets. It was better to do it himself. He had a small repair kit in his bag. He would find a quiet corner, away from the noise, away from the egos, and tend to his own small reality while the titans of the industry crumbled around him. Leo walked towards the prop storage area, the opposite direction of the crowd. It was darker there, quieter. As he walked, he passed the vanity table. The case was gone, secured by the guards, but the empty space on the velvet tablecloth seemed to vibrate with a lingering energy. Diamonds had a way of doing that. They made people crazy. They made people forget who they were. He pushed open the heavy double doors leading to the backstage corridors, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the concrete. He didn't know it yet, but he was walking out of the frying pan and into the fire. The silence of the empty studio hallway felt heavy, pregnant with a secret that was waiting to be born. Leo adjusted his grip on his bag, kept his head down, and moved deeper into the labyrinth of the studio, unknowingly stepping onto the stage of a performance that would require the greatest acting of his life. The double doors of the soundstage sealed with a pneumatic hiss, cutting off the cacophony of the departing crew and leaving Leo Vance in the sudden, ringing silence of the backstage corridors. This part of the studio lot was known colloquially as the Boneyard, a labyrinthine storage wing where the ghosts of past productions came to rest. Here, the glamorous illusion of Hollywood was stripped down to its bare, dusty components. Leo walked past a fiberglass dragon from a failed fantasy epic, its paint peeling like sunburned skin, and navigated around a stack of Roman columns made of hollow plaster that smelled faintly of mildew and old coffee. Leo liked the Boneyard. It was honest. Unlike the frantic, ego-driven chaos of the main set, this place was static and peaceful. He found his way to the prop maintenance room, a cage-like enclosure filled with workbenches, tools, and shelves stacked high with everything from rubber handguns to vintage rotary phones. It was empty. Jim, the prop master, was likely at the commissary arguing about the quality of the brisket, leaving his kingdom unguarded but for the assumption that no one would bother stealing a broken umbrella or a glue gun. Leo sat on a stool that wobbled precariously, pulling his right boot onto his lap. The sole was flapping like a dying fish, threatening to trip him during the next take. He retrieved his small travel sewing kit, a habit from his theater days when budgets were zero and self-reliance was paramount, and began to thread a needle with thick, black wax cord. The repetitive motion was soothing. In, out, pull tight, in, out. It was a meditation, a way to ground himself before he had to return to being a piece of furniture in Chase Sterling's world. He had just finished the first knot when the silence was shattered. The heavy fire door at the end of the corridor slammed open, the metal reverberating against the concrete walls like a gunshot. Leo froze, the needle hovering halfway through the leather. He didn't move. Years of playing characters who survived by being unnoticed had instilled in him a prey animal's instinct. Be still and the predator might pass. Heavy, erratic footsteps echoed on the linoleum. Someone was pacing, not walking with purpose, but pacing with the frantic, caged energy of a man whose world was collapsing. I told you, I don't have it. The voice was unmistakable. It was Chase Sterling, but stripped of the velvet baritone he used for interviews. This voice was high, thin, and edged with hysteria. Leo remained motionless in the shadows of the wire mesh cage. Through the gaps in the shelving, past a row of severed mannequin heads, he saw Chase burst into the adjacent VIP green room, a glorified holding cell for the talent, furnished with leather sofas and a fully stocked bar. Chase didn't close the door. He didn't seem to care who heard him. He was too consumed by the voice on the other end of his phone. "Don't you threaten me, Marco?" Chase spat, his free hand raking through his meticulously styled hair, destroying the work of 3 makeup artists in a single second. "I'm Chase Sterling. Do you know who I am? I generate millions. No, listen. Listen to me." Chase stopped pacing and kicked a heavy oak coffee table. The thud was dull and sickening. He hissed in pain, hopping on one foot for a moment before collapsing onto the sofa, the phone still pressed to his ear. Tonight. I know. Midnight. 500,000. Yes. I understand the consequences. Chase's voice dropped to a whisper, a terrified rasp that carried more weight than his shouting. Please, Marco. I like my legs. I need them to work. Okay. Just don't call the studio. If the producers find out I'm gambling again, the insurance bond gets pulled. The movie shuts down. Then nobody gets paid. There was a pause, a silence filled only by the hum of the air conditioning and the frantic beating of Leo's own heart. He shouldn't be hearing this. This wasn't just gossip. This was leverage. This was dangerous. Chase ended the call and let the phone drop to the floor. He sat with his head in his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs. It was a pathetic sight. The golden boy, the idol of millions, reduced to a trembling mess by a bookie named Marco. Leo debated making a noise, perhaps coughing to announce his presence and give Chase the dignity of composing himself. But before he could decide, Chase stood up abruptly. He wiped his face with his sleeve, smearing foundation onto the expensive fabric of his tuxedo, and walked toward the wet bar. He poured a glass of amber liquid, whiskey, likely aged and expensive, and downed it in one gulp. Then another. As Chase turned, the glass still in his hand, his eyes swept across the room and locked onto the prop maintenance cage. He squinted into the gloom. Who's there? Chase barked, the aggression instant and defensive. Leo sighed. There was no point hiding now. He placed his boot on the floor and stepped into the sliver of light falling through the doorway. Just me, Chase? Leo said, keeping his hands visible and his voice neutral. Fixing a wardrobe malfunction. Didn't mean to intrude. Chase stiffened, his eyes darting around the hallway to see if anyone else was with Leo. When he realized they were alone, his shoulders dropped slightly, but the tension in his jaw remained. He walked slowly toward the cage, stepping over the threshold into Leo's sanctuary. Up close, the movie star looked ravaged. The makeup couldn't hide the gray pallor of his skin or the bloodshot roadmap in the whites of his eyes. How long have you been sitting there? Chase asked softly, dangerously. Long enough to fix a heel. Leo lied smoothly. Just got here. Chase stared at him, analyzing, calculating. He stepped closer, invading Leo's personal space, bringing with him the smell of expensive cologne, stale sweat, and whiskey. You're a terrible liar, Leo. I've seen your dailies. You're actually a decent actor. Don't insult me. Leo didn't flinch. I'm not looking for trouble, Chase. What I hear or don't hear, it stays in the boneyard. I just want to finish the day and go home. Chase laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Home, right? To your apartment? Studio? What is it you drive? A 2015 Honda? He circled Leo, like a shark inspecting a piece of driftwood. You don't get it, do you? You think you can just sit here, invisible, and judge me? You think because you don't have my problems, you're better than me? I don't think about you at all, Chase, Leo said. It was the truest thing he had said all day. Chase stopped circling. He turned his back to Leo, looking out into the hallway toward the VIP green room. His gaze drifted, unfocused, until it landed on something in the center of the room. The set decorators had left a small display table in the green room to hold the hero props during the break. Items that needed to be kept safe but accessible. And there, resting on a black velvet bust, was the necklace, the heart of the sea. Leo followed Chase's gaze. He saw the necklace. He saw Chase's body go rigid. A dangerous silence stretched between them. Leo knew the protocol. Jim, the prop master, was a stickler for security. When the lunch bell rang, the armed guards usually took the real $2. 5 million diamond necklace to the vault. In its place, Jim would swap in the stunt double, a high-quality replica made of cubic zirconia and silver, used for lighting tests and wide shots where the detail didn't matter. It was worth maybe $200 tops. But looking at Chase's back, Leo realized something terrifying. Chase didn't know the protocol. Chase wasn't paying attention when Jim gave the safety briefing. Chase was too busy signing autographs or checking his odds on the ponies. To Chase Sterling, standing in a haze of panic and alcohol, that necklace on the table wasn't a piece of glass. It was $500,000. It was his kneecaps. It was his salvation. Chase turned back to Leo. The fear was gone from his eyes, replaced by a manic, terrifying clarity. Plan had formed. A terrible, reckless, desperate plan. "Leo, my friend," Chase said, his voice dripping with a sudden, oily charm that was far more unsettling than his anger. "You know, I was watching you earlier. In the scene. You have intensity, a real focus." Leo blinked, caught off guard by the sudden pivot. "Thanks. You take your craft seriously. I respect that. Not like these other hacks," Chase continued, stepping closer, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. The grip was too tight. "You're a method actor, right? Like Day-Lewis? You immerse yourself?" "I try," Leo said cautiously. The next scene, Chase's eyes bored into him. "Your character, the servant, he gets thrown into the dungeon. Dark, cold, isolated, abandoned by the world." Chase leaned in, whispering now, "If I were you, Leo, if I really wanted to nail that emotion, I wouldn't be sitting here in this open room. I'd find a hole, a real dark hole, somewhere tight, somewhere nobody could find me." Leo understood. He looked at the necklace, then back at Chase. Chase wasn't just giving acting advice. He was creating a window. He wanted Leo gone. He wanted the witness removed. "You think?" Leo asked, playing along. "I know." Chase nodded vigorously. "There's a supply closet in Sector B. Way back. Thick walls. No light. Total sensory deprivation. If you went in there, locked yourself in for, say, 30 minutes, you'd come out with a performance that would blow Elena away. Hell, I'd vouch for you. I'd tell the producers to give you a featured credit. It was a bribe, a trade. Disappear and I'll make you a star." Leo felt a cold knot in his stomach. He knew what Chase was going to do. If Leo stayed, there would be a confrontation. Chase was unstable, maybe violent, but if Leo left, he would be leaving the necklace unprotected. But then, Leo remembered the sparkle of the stones. "It's the fake," he reminded himself. "Jim swapped it. I saw him do the switch 10 minutes before the break." If Chase wanted to steal a $50 necklace to pay a $500,000 debt, that was his tragedy. Leo wasn't a cop. He wasn't a hero. He was a background actor who just wanted to pay his rent. And there was something else. A spark of opportunism that Leo usually suppressed. If Chase actually went through with this, if the golden boy tarnished himself, maybe the playing field would finally level out. "Sector B," Leo said slowly. "That sounds perfect. Thanks, Chase. I really want to impress Elena." "You will, buddy. You will." Chase patted his cheek, a gesture that was patronizing and possessive. "Go. Now, don't let anyone break your concentration. Don't talk to anyone." "I won't," Leo said. He gathered his sewing kit, zipped his duffel bag, and stood up. He walked out of the cage, past Chase, and toward the exit that led to Sector B. He didn't look back at the necklace. He didn't look back at Chase. He walked with the steady, heavy gait of a man marching to his own execution, or perhaps his own liberation. As the heavy door to Sector B clicked shut behind him, Leo didn't go immediately to the closet. He stopped. He pulled out his phone. He looked at the time. 12:53 p.m. He thought about the closet Chase had mentioned. It was deep in the abandoned wing. No foot traffic. No security cameras nearby because the wiring had been stripped last month for renovation. It was a black hole. Perfect, Leo thought. He walked to the closet, opened the door, and stepped into the pitch black. But before he closed himself in, he did something Chase Sterling, in his arrogance and technological illiteracy, would never have anticipated. Leo opened Instagram. He swiped right. He tapped Live. He waited for the connection to stabilize. The counter ticked up. 1 viewer, 10 viewers, 50 viewers. "Hey guys," Leo whispered into the dark, his face illuminated only by the ghostly blue light of the screen. "Welcome to my office. I'm going to be sitting in this box for the next half hour to prepare for a scene." I figured, why be lonely? Let's talk about acting. Back in the green room, Chase Sterling waited until the sound of Leo's footsteps had completely faded. He held his breath, listening to the hum of the studio. Silence. He was alone. He turned to the velvet bust. The necklace stared back at him. It was mesmerizing. He didn't know diamonds. He didn't know clarity or cut. He only knew that this thing was the key to keeping his knees intact. Chase moved. He didn't have a plan for the lock, so he improvised. He grabbed a heavy bronze statuette, an award from a previous film that was being used as a paperweight, and smashed it against the glass case. Crack. The sound was shockingly loud. Chase winced, freezing, waiting for sirens. Nothing. The glass spiderwebbed but didn't shatter. He hit it again. Harder. Crash. Shards rained down onto the velvet table. He reached in, a shard slicing his thumb, drawing a bead of bright red blood that dripped onto the white tablecloth. He didn't care. His fingers closed around the cold metal of the necklace. He yanked it free, the clasp snapping. He had it. He shoved the necklace into his tuxedo pocket, the adrenaline spiking so hard his vision blurred. Now what? He couldn't just walk out with it. The guards would search him if they suspected anything. He needed to hide it. He needed to get it off the lot later, maybe in a different car, or have Marco pick it up from a drop point. He looked around the room, panic rising again. Where to hide it? His eyes landed on the coat rack near the door. There was a bag there. A worn, gray canvas duffel bag. Leo's bag. Leo must have forgotten it in his haste to leave. Or maybe he left it intentionally. It didn't matter. A dark, twisted logic seized Chase's mind. If he hid the necklace in Leo's bag, it was safe. Nobody looked at Leo. Leo was invisible. Chase could retrieve it later, or if the theft was discovered, who would they suspect? The rich superstar with everything to lose, or the desperate, no-name extra who was skulking around the prop room? It was cruel. It was evil. But it was survival. Chase crossed the room in 2 strides. He unzipped Leo's bag. It smelled of old gym clothes and cheap deodorant. He shoved the necklace deep inside, wrapping it in a pair of thick wool socks to muffle any clinking sound. He zipped the bag shut. He stepped back, breathing heavily. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. He looked deranged. "Pull it together," he whispered to his reflection. "You're Chase Sterling. You're the hero." He smoothed his hair. He wiped the blood from his thumb onto his black trousers where it wouldn't show. He adjusted his tie. He needed to be seen. He needed an alibi. He needed to be surrounded by people, laughing, eating, being the star. Chase turned and walked out of the green room, leaving the shattered glass and the empty velvet bust behind him. He walked toward the cafeteria, putting on his smile like a piece of armor, completely unaware that in a dark closet in Sector B, a red, live icon was blinking in the darkness, recording the passage of every second he tried to steal. The cafeteria was a brightly lit purgatory of stainless steel and formica, smelling aggressively of steamed broccoli and burnt coffee, a sensory assault that Chase Sterling usually avoided at all costs. His rider explicitly stated that his meals were to be delivered to his trailer, organic, gluten-free, and plated on ceramic, never plastic. But today, the trailer felt like a coffin. He needed noise. He needed witnesses. He needed to be the sun in the center of the solar system, blinding everyone so they couldn't see the shadow stretching out behind him. Chase sat at the head of a long communal table, flanked by the hair and makeup team who were looking at him with a mixture of adoration and confusion. He was laughing too loud. The sound bounced off the industrial tile walls, brittle and sharp. He was telling a story about a yacht party in Cannes, a recycled anecdote he'd polished over years of talk show appearances. But his timing was off. He kept checking his watch. He kept glancing at the door. Every time the cafeteria entrance swung open, his heart hammered against his ribs like a fist, anticipating the inevitable scream, the siren, the crash of his world ending. "You haven't touched your quinoa, Chase," one of the makeup artists noted, pointing her fork at his pristine plate. You okay? You look dewy. Just the heat, darling. Just the heat, Chase said, flashing a smile that felt like it might crack the foundation on his face. He grabbed a bottle of water and downed half of it, his hand trembling slightly. He hid the tremor by gripping the bottle until the plastic crunched. Actually, I'm just pumped. Next scene is big. Heavy emotional lifting. I'm vibrating with it. You're such a professional, she sighed. Chase wanted to vomit. He felt the weight of the necklace in Leo's bag. A phantom weight, heavy in his mind even though the bag was sitting in the green room hundreds of yards away. He had done it. He had actually done it. The realization was a cold stone in his stomach. He looked around the room, scanning the faces of the crew he had just betrayed. Grips eating sandwiches with grease-stained hands, camera assistants scrolling through their phones, tired, underpaid people who would lose their jobs if the production shut down. He pushed the guilt down, drowning it in another wave of narcissism. It's not my fault, he told himself. It's the debt. It's Marco. I'm the victim here. All right, lunch is over. Back to the grind. The assistant director's voice boomed over the localized PA system. The scraping of chairs against the floor sounded like a landslide. Chase stood up, his legs feeling like water. He fell into step with the crowd, merging into the stream of bodies flowing back toward the soundstage. He adopted his signature strut, chin up, shoulders back, but his eyes were darting everywhere. Where was Leo? Was he still in the closet? Had he come out? If Leo walked into the green room now and saw the broken glass, Chase quickened his pace. He needed to be on set. He needed to be under the lights when the discovery happened. He needed to be nowhere near the scene of the crime. They entered the soundstage. The transition from the bright California sun to the artificial gloom of the Victorian ballroom was disorienting. The air inside was still and cool, preserved in the silence of the lunch break. Chase walked straight to his mark, standing amidst the velvet drapes, waiting. He saw Elena, the director, talking to the cinematographer near the monitors. She looked calm. Nobody knew yet. Then the scream came. It wasn't a theatrical scream. It was a guttural, confused shout of dismay that tore through the quiet studio. It came from the direction of the green room. Oh my God! Security! Get security! The chatter on the set died instantly. Elena dropped her coffee cup. The splash of dark liquid on the polished floor was the only movement for a heartbeat. Then chaos. Jim, the prop master, came running out of the hallway tunnel, his face the color of ash. He was hyperventilating, pointing back toward the VIP area. The case is smashed. It's gone. What is gone, Jim? Elena demanded, stepping forward, her voice low and dangerous. The heart. The necklace. Someone smashed the display. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Chase forced himself to gasp, bringing a hand to his mouth in a rehearsed gesture of shock. No, he whispered, loud enough for the boom mic to pick up. That's impossible. Lock it down. Elena screamed, her authority snapping back into place. Nobody leaves this building. AD, call the police. Get the guards on the exits. Nobody steps a foot outside. The massive soundproof doors of the studio began to rumble shut, sealing them in. The red recording lights above the exits flashed, usually a sign of art being made, now a warning of entrapment. A murmur of panic rippled through the crew. People started checking their pockets, looking at each other with sudden suspicion. The camaraderie of the lunch break evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of the accused. Chase stayed in the center of the room. He watched the frenzy with a detached, floating sensation. It was happening. The script he had written in his head was playing out. Now he just had to hit his marks. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the thick walls of the soundstage. The LAPD didn't waste time with grand larceny. The side doors opened, and four uniformed officers marched in, followed by two detectives in cheap suits who looked like they hadn't slept in a week. The lead detective, a man named Miller with a face carved from granite and cynicism, walked straight to Elena. Nobody moves, Miller announced, his voice carrying without a megaphone. This is now a crime scene. We're going to search everyone. We're going to search every bag, every trailer, and every car. If you have something to say it now. Silence. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. All right? Miller nodded to his officers. Start with the perimeter. Check the cameras. Cameras were down for maintenance, Detective, Elena said, her voice shaking with frustration. Between 1 and 1:20. Miller let out a short, dry laugh. Of course they were. How convenient. So we have an inside job. A 20-minute window. Who had access to the VIP area? Everyone, Jim stammered. The door was unlocked. The guards were changing shift. Chase stepped forward. This was his cue. He needed to be the helpful citizen. Officer, he said, projecting his voice. I was in the cafeteria with the makeup team. They can vouch for me. We'll get to you, Mr. Sterling, Miller said, unimpressed by the star power. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the faces of the crew. We're going to do this the hard way. Line up, bags on the floor. Step back. The humiliation began. The cast and crew, from the highest-paid lighting director to the lowest intern, lined up against the fake ballroom walls. Bags were unzipped, dumped out, searched. The sound of zippers and the clatter of personal items hitting the floor filled the room. Chase stood in line, his heart racing. He watched the officers moving closer to the green room, closer to the coat rack. He needed to make sure they looked there specifically. Wait, Chase said suddenly, breaking the silence. He turned to Elena. Where is Leo? Elena frowned, looking down the line. Leo Vance, Chase said, his voice laced with concern. The extra, the servant character. I was talking to him right before lunch. He seemed agitated. He said he needed money. That's a lie, a grip muttered nearby, but nobody listened. I don't see him, Elena said, scanning the crowd. Is Leo Vance here? Here. The voice came from the far side of the studio. The heavy fire door to Sector B opened, and Leo Vance stepped out. He blinked against the bright lights, looking like a man waking from a deep sleep. His hair was messy, his shirt untucked. He was holding his phone. Sorry, Leo said, walking toward the group, oblivious to the tension. I was preparing. Did I miss the call time? The entire room turned to look at him. To the police, he looked guilty. He looked disheveled, sweaty, and he was coming from a dark, unmonitored area of the studio. Bring him here, Detective Miller ordered. 2 officers grabbed Leo by the arms. Leo flinched, pulling back. Hey, what is this? What's going on? Where were you between 1 and 1:20? Miller barked, stepping into Leo's face. I was in the supply closet, Leo said, confusing everyone. In Sector B. Hiding. Miller raised an eyebrow. Acting, Leo corrected. Preparing. Why? What happened? Chase stepped out of the line again, shaking his head. Leo, come on. Just tell them. Maybe if you give it back, they'll go easy on you. Leo looked at Chase. The realization hit him slowly. The look in Chase's eyes wasn't concern. It was predation. The conversation in the hallway. The suggestion to hide in the closet. The unlocked necklace. It all clicked into place like the tumblers of a lock. You, Leo started, his eyes widening. Check his bag, Chase said to the detective, pointing toward the green room. I saw his bag in the VIP room. He left it there before he went to the closet. Miller gestured to an officer. Get the bag. The officer disappeared into the hallway. The seconds that followed were excruciating. Leo stood pinned between the 2 cops, his breathing steady, his eyes locked on Chase. Chase couldn't hold the gaze. He looked at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at the man he was framing. The officer returned. He was holding the gray canvas duffel bag. It looked innocuous, cheap, worn. He placed it on a table in the center of the room. Is this yours? Miller asked Leo. Yes, Leo said. But I haven't touched it since morning. Open it, Miller commanded. The officer unzipped the main compartment. He pushed aside a script, a water bottle, a change of clothes. Then his hand paused. He felt something. He reached deeper, pulling out a bundled pair of thick wool socks. Chase held his breath. This was it. The climax. The officer unrolled the socks. The heart of the sea tumbled out, landing on the table with a heavy, metallic clatter. The diamonds caught the overhead lights, sending fractals of brilliance spinning across the room. A collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the studio. Elena covered her mouth. Jim looked like he was going to faint. Well, Miller said, looking at Leo with cold satisfaction. Acting, huh? That's a hell of a prop you got there. I didn't put that there, Leo said. His voice was calm. Too calm. It wasn't the voice of a man caught red-handed. It was the voice of a man watching a car crash in slow motion. Save it for the station, Miller said. He nodded to the officers holding Leo. Cuff him. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was louder than the scream had been. Metal on metal. Finality. Chase let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He slumped his shoulders, feigning devastation. Leo, why? He asked, his voice cracking perfectly. I told you I could help you. You didn't have to steal. Leo didn't fight as the officers turned him around. He didn't scream or beg. He just looked at Chase. The expression on his face wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was a strange, terrifying pity. And beneath the pity, there was a sharpness, a glint of intelligence that Chase had never noticed before. Don't wrap the scene yet, Chase, Leo said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Get him out of here, Miller ordered. As they marched Leo toward the exit, passing the stunned crew, the broken director, and the triumphant star, the atmosphere shifted. The theft was solved. The villain was caught. The hero was safe. But as the police pushed Leo through the doors, Chase felt a sudden, violent shiver crawl up his spine. He looked at the necklace on the table. It was safe. He was safe. So why did he feel like the floor was about to open up and swallow him whole? Elena walked over to the table, staring at the diamonds. She looked exhausted. All right, she whispered. We have it back. Police take it as evidence. Everyone else, go home. We're done for the day. The crew began to disperse, whispering, casting angry glances at the door where Leo had vanished. They were angry at the betrayal, angry at the delay. They bought the lie. Everyone bought the lie. Chase turned to head back to his trailer, to finally wash the sweat off his face and drink that whiskey he desperately needed. He reached into his pocket to grab his phone, to text Marco that the money was. Well, he'd have to figure out the money later. But he was free. Mr. Sterling? Chase froze. It was Miller. The detective hadn't left with the suspect. Yes, detective? Chase asked, turning around, flashing the smile again. You said you saw the suspect's bag in the green room before lunch? Miller asked, his notebook out. Yes, right before. And you didn't see him put the necklace in it? No, I was leaving. I just saw the bag. Miller stared at him for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Right. Thanks for your help. Don't leave town, Mr. Sterling. We might need more statements. Of course. Anything to help. Chase watched the detective walk away. He was clear. He was sure of it. But as the adrenaline faded, a new sound began to filter into his consciousness. A buzzing. A notification sound. Not from his phone, but from the phones of the crew members around him. One person checked their screen. Then another. Then a group of 3 huddled together, looking at a phone, then looking up at Chase with wide eyes. The whispers changed. They weren't angry anymore. They were confused. What? Chase muttered to himself. He pulled out his own phone. He had a notification from Instagram, a suggested live stream. Leo Vance was live. Chase frowned. Leo was in cuffs. How could he be live? He tapped the notification. It wasn't live now, it was a replay. The video had ended 10 minutes ago. Chase stared at the tiny screen, and the blood drained from his face so fast he nearly fainted. The thumbnail of the video showed Leo sitting in a dark closet. The timestamp was clearly visible. 12:55 p.m. Chase felt the world tilt. He looked up. Elena was looking at her phone. Jim was looking at his phone. The entire studio was looking at their phones. And then, slowly, one by one, they all lifted their heads and looked at Chase. The silence that descended upon Studio 4 was not the reverent hush of a church, nor the disciplined quiet of a film set waiting for the director's call. It was a dense, suffocating static, the kind that precedes the shockwave of an explosion. It started with a single digital chime, a notification sound that cut through the stale air like a scalpel, and then multiplied, spreading from the camera assistants to the grips, from the hairstylists to the producers, until the room was alive with the soft, blue luminescence of 100 phone screens. Chase Sterling stood in the center of this expanding web, his smile frozen in a rictus of practiced charm that was rapidly losing its adhesion. He watched as Elena, the director, stared at her phone, her eyebrows knitting together in a frown that deepened with every passing second. He watched as Jim, the prop master, lowered his device and looked up, his mouth slightly open, his eyes darting from the screen to the exit where the police were dragging Leo Vance away. "Detective!" Elena's voice was sharp, cracking the tension. It wasn't a request. It was a command that stopped the heavy studio doors from closing. "Detective Miller, wait. You need to see this." Miller, halfway through the door with a hand on Leo's shoulder, paused. He looked annoyed, a man who had solved the puzzle and wanted to file the paperwork. "What is it now? We have the suspect. We have the evidence." "You have the wrong man," Elena said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with the sudden, vertigo-inducing realization of truth. She held her phone up, the screen bright against the gloom of the soundstage. Leo Vance couldn't have put that necklace in the bag. He wasn't even in the building. Chase felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine, tracing the curve of his vertebrae like a finger of ice. Not in the building. That was impossible. He had seen Leo go into the closet. The closet was in Sector B. That was inside the building. Miller walked back into the room, leaving Leo with the uniformed officers by the door. He took the phone from Elena. "What am I looking at?" "It's an Instagram Live archive." A young production assistant piped up from the back, her voice shaking. Leo started it at 12:55 p.m. He didn't end it until 1:30 p.m. He was talking to fans the entire time. Miller hit play. The audio, tinny and small from the phone speaker, seemed to echo in the cavernous room. "So the key to playing a prisoner," Leo's voice whispered from the video, "is to embrace the sensory deprivation. I'm in a closet right now. It's pitch black. I can smell cedar and old dust. I'm not going to leave until I feel the walls closing in." Miller scrubbed through the timeline. 1:05 p.m. Leo was answering a question about voice projection. 1:15 p.m. Leo was showing the camera a spiderweb in the corner of the doorframe. 1:20 p.m. Leo was still there, sitting cross-legged, calm, immovable. The timeline was absolute. The theft had occurred between 1 p.m. and 1:20 p.m. The distance between the green room, where the necklace was stolen, and the Sector B closet was a 15-minute walk across the lot. Even if Leo had sprinted, he couldn't have been in two places at once. The laws of physics had just become Chase Sterling's worst enemy. Miller looked up from the screen, his eyes narrowing as he processed the data. He handed the phone back to Elena and turned toward the door. "Bring him back." As the officers uncuffed Leo and led him back into the center of the room, Chase felt the floor swaying beneath him. The narrative was collapsing. He had written a tragedy for Leo, but the genre was shifting rapidly into a courtroom thriller, and he was standing on the wrong side of the witness stand. He tried to marshal his thoughts, to find the improvisation that would save him, but his mind was a white noise of panic. This is a trick," Chase stammered, his voice too loud in the quiet room. "Pre-recorded." He could have pre-recorded the video and played it as a live stream. Leo rubbed his wrists where the handcuffs had pinched him. He looked at Chase, and for the first time, he didn't look like a background actor. He stood taller, his posture shedding the slump of the servant character he played. He looked directly into the camera of Chase's soul. "Check the chat logs, Chase," Leo said, his voice calm, devastatingly reasonable. "I was responding to comments in real time. User MovieBuff88. asked me what I had for lunch at 1:12 p.m. I answered, "You can't pre-record interaction." Miller nodded slowly. He's right. The alibi is solid. Mr. Vance was nowhere near the green room. The detective turned his gaze toward the table where the gray duffel bag sat, the heart of the sea glittering mockingly on top of the wool socks. "So," Miller said, his tone shifting from accusatory to inquisitive, a much more dangerous frequency. "If Mr. Vance didn't put the necklace in his bag, who did?" The question hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. "Someone framed him," Elena whispered, horror dawning on her face. "Someone stole the necklace and planted it on Leo." "And who?" Miller continued, pivoting slowly on his heels to scan the room. "Knew where Mr. Vance's bag was. Who pointed us to it?" Every eye in the room swiveled toward Chase. It wasn't a coordinated movement. It was a ripple of realization. The makeup artist who had been fawning over him 10 minutes ago now looked at him with suspicion. The camera operator lowered his rig. The reverence was gone, replaced by the cold, hard scrutiny of a mob realizing their emperor was naked. Chase laughed. It was a brittle, jagged sound. "Oh, come on. You're joking, right? Me? Chase Sterling? Why would I steal a necklace? I make $20 million a picture. I could buy this studio. Gambling debts aren't paid with future earnings." "Mr. Sterling," Leo said quietly. Chase flinched as if he'd been slapped. "Shut up. You don't know anything." "I know you were on the phone in the hallway," Leo continued, relentlessly calm. "I know you were begging someone named Marco for time. I know you need $500,000 by midnight." "Liar." Chase screamed, stepping forward, his fists clenched. "He's lying. He's a bitter, no-name extra trying to take me down." "Is he?" Miller stepped between them, his hand resting casually near his belt. "We can check your phone records, Mr. Sterling. We can check your financials. If we dig, are we going to find a Marco?" Chase stopped. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure left too close to a fire. He realized, with a sickening jolt, that he had underestimated everything. He had underestimated the police, he had underestimated the technology, but mostly he had underestimated Leo Vance. "This is ridiculous," Chase hissed, trying to regain his composure, smoothing the lapels of his tuxedo. "Fine, investigate me, but you have no proof. Just the word of a man who was acting in a closet. Anyone could have put that necklace in the bag." The green room was open. "True," Miller conceded. "Anyone could have, but we have physical evidence now." He pointed to the necklace. "We'll dust the bag for prints. We'll check the necklace for DNA. If you touched it, Chase, we will know." Chase felt a flicker of hope. He had been careful. He hadn't touched the bag much, just the zipper. And the necklace. He had grabbed it. Yes, but he had wiped his hands, hadn't he? Or had he? The memory was a blur of adrenaline. But before Miller could order the forensics team to bag the evidence, Jim, the prop master, stepped forward. He walked to the table with the gait of a man marching to a funeral. He looked at the heart of the sea, then at Chase, then at Elena. "Actually, detective," Jim said, his voice trembling, "there's something you need to know about the necklace." "What?" Miller asked. Jim picked up the glittering piece of jewelry. He didn't use gloves. He dangled it from his finger, swinging it back and forth. "This isn't the heart of the sea." Chase blinked. "What?" "It's the stunt double," Jim said, a hysterical giggle escaping his throat. "It's paste, cubic zirconia and silver-plated brass. We swapped them out during lunch breaks for insurance purposes. The real necklace, the $5 million diamond necklace, is in the floor safe in my office. It's been there since 12:45 p.m. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of absurdity. Chase stared at the necklace swinging from Jim's finger. The light caught the stones, and for the first time, Chase saw them for what they were, dull, lifeless glass. "You mean?" Chase whispered, his voice cracking. The thief stole a fake? A fake worth about $49 on Amazon," Jim confirmed. "Less if you buy in bulk." Laughter bubbled up from somewhere in the back of the room. It started low, a single snort of disbelief, and then spread. The grip laughed. The script supervisor covered her mouth to hide a smile. Even the police officers were smirking. Chase Sterling, the golden boy, the icon of sophistication, had committed a felony. Grand larceny, framing an innocent man, obstruction of justice, for a piece of costume jewelry that wasn't worth the price of his lunch. Chase felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. This was it. The end of the career. The mockery would kill him faster than the jail time. He could see the headlines already. Sterling steals glass. The fool's gold heist. Well, Miller said, shaking his head, a look of profound pity on his face. That changes the charge from grand larceny to petty theft. But framing a man? Filing a false police report? That's still serious, Mr. Sterling. I didn't do it, Chase shouted. The denial automatic, desperate, pathetic. You can't prove I did it. Just because I have debts doesn't mean I stole this. This trash. Maybe Leo stole the fake one. Maybe he didn't know the difference either. We're back to the alibi, Chase. Leo reminded him gently. I was in the closet. Then someone else. Chase spun around, pointing a shaking finger at the crew. One of them. They all hate me. They set me up. Jim cleared his throat again. There is one more thing, Detective. What now? Miller sighed. The inventory system, Jim said. The studio has been having issues with prop theft lately. People taking souvenirs. So, last week, production installed RFID trackers in the high-value props. And since the stunt necklace is technically a recurring prop, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tablet-like device. It has a tracker, but not in the stones. Jim tapped the screen. A digital map of the studio appeared. The tracker is a small microchip embedded in the clasp mechanism, Jim explained. It's magnetic. It triggers if the prop leaves the designated zone. Chase froze. His hand went instinctively to his pocket. He remembered the moment in the green room, the panic, the rush. He had yanked the necklace from the display. The clasp had snapped. He yanked it free, the clasp snapping. He hadn't put the clasp in the bag. He had shoved the chain and the stones into the socks. But the clasp, the broken piece of metal. The tracker is active, Jim said, watching the dot on the screen. And it's very close. Miller stepped closer to Chase. Mr. Sterling, empty your pockets. I don't have to. Empty them. Now. Miller's voice was like a slamming door. Chase's hands shook so badly he could barely coordinate his fingers. He reached into the pocket of his tuxedo trousers. He pulled out a sleek black lighter, pack of gum, and then his fingers brushed against something small, cold, and jagged. He pulled it out. Resting in the palm of his manicured hand was a small silver clasp, broken at the hinge. A tiny red light blinked on its underside. Beep, beep, beep. The sound was faint, electronic, and utterly damning. That, Jim said, pointing at the object in Chase's hand, is the RFID tag for prop #45B. The necklace found in Leo's bag has a broken chain. That is the missing piece. Chase stared at the clasp. It wasn't just metal. It was a verdict. He had literally carried the evidence of his guilt in his pocket while trying to frame an innocent man. He had walked around the set, eaten lunch, and spoken to the police, all while the digital heartbeat of his crime ticked away against his thigh. Chase Sterling, Detective Miller said, pulling a new pair of handcuffs from his belt. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it because you're really bad at talking your way out of things. As the cuffs clicked onto Chase's wrists, real cuffs, not the props he was used to, the studio didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They just watched. The silence was absolute. The star had fallen, not with a bang, but with the beep of a $40 prop tracker. Chase looked up, searching for a friendly face, someone who would yell, "Cut!" and tell him this was just a rehearsal. But there was no director to save him. He looked at Leo. Leo was standing next to Elena, holding his script. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. He looked at Chase with a mixture of sadness and resolve. Why? Chase whispered, the question directed at the universe, at the unfairness of it all. Leo stepped forward just a half step, enough to bridge the distance between the actor and the star. Because, Chase, Leo said softly, you forgot the first rule of acting. You have to be truthful in imaginary circumstances. You tried to fake it. And the camera always sees the lie. The police turned Chase around and began the long walk to the exit. The gilded cage set, with its fake gold and velvet, seemed to mock him. He was being dragged out of his own kingdom, a king deposed by a jester, leaving behind a legacy of glass diamonds and broken promises. As the doors opened to the blinding afternoon sun, revealing the waiting paparazzi who had undoubtedly been tipped off by the sirens, Chase Sterling closed his eyes. The flashbulbs popped, a staccato rhythm of white light that felt like punches. This was the spotlight he had always craved, but now it burned. The departure of a movie star is usually an event of orchestrated chaos. A flurry of publicists, black SUVs, and screaming fans. But Chase Sterling's exit had been a grim, industrial affair, marked only by the flashing lights of a squad car and the heavy, pneumatic hiss of the studio doors sealing the rest of the world back inside. When the lock engaged, leaving the cast and crew of the Gilded Cage alone once more in the artificial twilight of the Victorian ballroom, the silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. It was the silence of a machine that had suddenly, violently seized up. Elena, the director, sat on the edge of the camera dolly, her head in her hands. She looked small, diminished against the backdrop of the towering velvet drapes and the faux marble columns. The energy that usually radiated from her, the manic, creative force that drove the production, had evaporated, leaving behind a woman staring into the abyss of a canceled project. Around her, the crew moved like ghosts, their footsteps muffled on the soundstage floor. There was no shouting, no rushing, just the slow, bewildered drift of 300 people realizing they might be unemployed by dinner time. Strike the set. A producer's voice cut through the gloom. It was Marcus, the studio executive, a man whose suit cost more than the lighting rig. He was standing near the video village, tapping furiously on his phone, already calculating the tax write-offs. Pack it up. We're done. I'm calling the insurance bond company. We're shutting down. Marcus, wait, Elena said, lifting her head. Her voice was brittle, scraping against the silence. We have the set. We have the crew. The day is paid for. We don't have a leading man. Elena, Marcus snapped, his veneer of corporate politeness shattered by the disaster. Chase is in cuffs. The footage we shot this morning is unusable because he looks like a panicked drug addict in every frame. We are $20 million in the hole, and our star is currently trending on Twitter for stealing costume jewelry. It's over. Kill the lights. The order hung in the air, a death sentence for the film. The gaffer reached for the master switch. Isabella, the leading lady, was weeping softly in the corner, her makeup streaming down her face, mourning not just the movie but the months of preparation she had poured into her role. Leo Vance stood by the craft services table, holding a lukewarm cup of water. He should have left. He had been cleared, vindicated, and arguably the hero of the hour. He should be calling his agent, or perhaps a lawyer, to discuss a defamation suit against Chase. But he couldn't move. He watched the crew, the electricians, the carpenters, the seamstresses, beginning to coil cables and fold chairs with the heavy, resigned movements of defeat. He saw Jim, the prop master, staring blankly at the empty display case where the fake necklace had been, looking like a man who had failed his one duty. Leo felt a familiar ache in his chest. It was the ache of potential unfulfilled. He hated waste. He hated seeing the magic trick fail, not because the illusion was bad, but because the magician was a fraud. He looked at the set. The intricate lighting setup that had taken 6 hours to perfect, the beautiful blocking of the scene that was supposed to be the emotional core of the film. It was all going to be torn down, thrown into a dumpster, and forgotten. He crushed the paper cup in his hand. He tossed it into the trash. He walked toward the center of the room. "Don't kill the lights," Leo said. His voice wasn't loud. but it had a projection that carried to the back of the room. A resonant baritone honed by years of Shakespeare in the Park and off-Broadway theaters where the acoustics were dead. Marcus spun around, his face flushing with irritation. "Excuse me? Who are you?" "Oh right, the victim. Look, buddy, I'm sorry you got framed." "Really? Go see HR, they'll cut you a check for your trouble. But get off my set." Leo didn't stop. He walked past the producer, past the weeping leading lady, and stepped onto the ballroom floor. He stood on the mark, the piece of tape on the floor where Chase Sterling had stood an hour ago. He looked at the camera, then he looked at Elena. "You have the set," Leo said to her, ignoring Marcus completely. "You have the lights. You have the leading lady. You need to shoot scene 45. We don't have an actor." "Leo?" Elena sighed, rubbing her temples. "Chase is gone. You have an actor," Leo corrected gently. "You just don't have a star." Marcus let out a scoffing laugh. "You? The extra? You think you can just step in and play Lord Blackwood? This isn't a community theater production of our town, pal. This is a major motion picture. Do you even know the lines?" Leo turned to look at Marcus. He didn't smile. He didn't look arrogant. He looked like a mechanic looking at a broken engine, knowing exactly which bolt needed tightening. "Scene 45, Leo recited, his voice shifting. He wasn't Leo anymore. The posture changed. The slump of the servant vanished, replaced by the rigid, aristocratic spine of a 19th century nobleman. Lord Blackwood enters. He sees the necklace. He realizes the woman he loves has betrayed him for a title. The anger isn't explosive. It's cold. It's the death of hope. He turned to Isabella. She looked up, startled by the sudden shift in energy. "Isabella?" Leo said, but he was looking at her with Lord Blackwood's eyes. Eyes full of wounded pride and icy resolve. "Please, step to your mark. Let's just see if the lighting works. For the insurance report." Isabella hesitated. She looked at Elena. Elena looked at the producer, then back at the set. She saw something in Leo's stance. It was the same stillness she had seen in the video from the closet, the absolute, unwavering focus of a man who lived within the fiction. "Let him do it," Elena whispered. Then, louder, "Camera, reset. We're doing a lighting test. Stand in on the mark." "Elena, are you insane?" Marcus hissed. "We are burning money." "We're already burning, Marcus," she shot back. "Let me watch the fire." The crew, sensing a shift in the wind, scrambled back to their positions. The boom operator swung the mic back into place. The focus puller adjusted his dial, locking onto Leo's eyes. "Action," Elena said softly. Leo didn't move immediately. Chase Sterling had played this moment with bluster, storming in and shouting. Leo did the opposite. He stood perfectly still, letting the silence of the room settle around him like a cloak. He looked at the empty table where the necklace should have been. He traced the edge of the velvet with a finger, a gesture of intimacy and loss. When he spoke, his voice was a low rumble, barely above a whisper. Yet the boom mic picked up every syllable with crystal clarity. "You think this?" Leo paused, lifting his eyes to meet Isabella's. There was no anger in them, only a devastating heartbreak. "You think this trinket can buy your freedom?" Isabella gasped. It wasn't in the script. She gasped because, for the first time in 3 months of filming, she felt something coming from the other side of the scene. She wasn't looking at a narcissist worrying about his hair. She was looking at a man who was deeply, profoundly in pain. "I thought," Isabella stammered, finding her character's voice instinctively. "I thought it was what you wanted." Leo took a step toward her. The light from the chandelier caught the planes of his face. He wasn't classically handsome in the way Chase was. His face had lines, character, a rugged geography that the camera loved because it felt real. "I wanted a wife," Leo said. The line delivered with a mixture of tenderness and venom that made the script supervisor stop chewing her gum. "I did not ask for a martyr." He moved through the blocking effortlessly. He knew every mark because he had watched Chase miss them all morning. He knew where the light hit the hardest, and he angled his face to catch the shadow, creating a skull-like visage that foreshadowed the character's eventual downfall. He didn't just say the lines. He inhabited the space between them. The scene continued. It was a 3-minute dialogue, a dense, wordy exchange that Chase had stumbled through for weeks. Leo flowed through it like water. He improvised small physical beats. A twitch of the hand, a tightening of the jaw, that added layers of subtext the screenwriter hadn't even realized were there. When they reached the climax of the scene, the moment Lord Blackwood is supposed to grab the woman's arm and then pull away in disgust, Leo changed it. He didn't grab her. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her face, trembling with the desire to touch her and the revulsion of what she had done. He let the hand drop. The physical restraint was 10 times more powerful than the violence. "Goodbye, Elizabeth," Leo whispered. He turned and walked away, hitting the final mark deep in the background, a silhouette against the fake moonlight of the painted backdrop. Cut. Elena's voice was barely audible. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The camera operator was still peering through the viewfinder, mesmerized. Isabella was standing in the center of the room, tears, real tears this time, streaming down her face, her chest heaving with the residual emotion of the scene. Then, slowly, the gaffer started clapping. It was a slow, rhythmic clap. Then the boom operator joined in. Then the grips. Within moments, the entire soundstage was erupting in applause. It wasn't the polite applause for a star. It was the thunderous, primal applause of professionals acknowledging mastery. Leo turned around. He looked dazed, as if waking from a trance. He blinked, the persona of Lord Blackwood shedding away to reveal the humble, tired extra beneath. Elena walked onto the set. She ignored the tears on her own face. She walked straight up to Leo and took his hands in hers. "Where?" she choked out, then cleared her throat. "Where have you been hiding?" "Sector B," Leo said with a faint, tired smile. "In the closet." Marcus, the producer, pushed his way through the crowd. He looked shaken. The calculator in his brain had stopped crunching numbers and started seeing dollar signs of a different kind. He looked at the monitor, replaying the take. The screen showed a performance that was raw, magnetic, and undeniably brilliant. "Okay," Marcus said, loosening his tie. "Okay, that was something." "It was the movie," Elena said firmly. "That was the movie we're trying to make." "He's a nobody, Elena," Marcus argued, though his heart wasn't in it. "The studio wants a name. We can't sell a period drama on the back of." "What is your name again?" "Leo," he said. "Leo Vance." "Right, Leo Vance." "Who is Leo Vance?" "He's the man who just saved your production," Isabella said, stepping forward. She wiped her eyes, her makeup smeared but her expression fierce. "I'm not doing this scene with anyone else. If you hire another pretty boy from a CW show, I walk. I mean it. I finally felt the scene. He makes me better." Marcus looked at Isabella, the star with the ironclad contract. He looked at Elena, the visionary director who looked ready to kill for this. He looked at the crew, who were looking at Leo with newfound respect. And finally, he looked at Leo, a man wearing a servant's dirt on his face but standing with the dignity of a king. "We have an insurance payout coming for the Chase disaster," Marcus muttered, thinking aloud. "We could use that to market the Discovery angle. The Cinderella man of Hollywood. The extra who became a star. The press would eat it up. It's better than the theft story." He turned to Leo. "Can you do it again?" "I can do it better," Leo said simply. "I missed a beat on the second line. The timing was off." Elena laughed, a sound of pure relief. "You're hired. Get him to wardrobe. Get him out of those rags. We have a movie to finish." As the crew erupted into action, this time with renewed purpose and energy, Leo stood still for a moment. He looked toward the exit where Chase had been dragged out. He felt a strange sense of closure. The lying spotlight had been turned off, and a new one, a truthful one, had been switched on. He walked toward the wardrobe department, his heart beating a steady rhythm. He wasn't thinking about the fame or the money or the interviews that would come. He was thinking about the script, He was thinking about the next scene. He was thinking about the work. But as he passed the video village, he saw the monitor one last time. The frozen image of his own face, shadowy and intense, stared back at him. It was the face of a man who had waited his whole life for the door to open, and when it finally did, he hadn't just walked through it. He had torn it off the hinges. The production of The Gilded Cage didn't end that day. It began. The silence inside the elongated black limousine was a physical weight, a velvet-lined vacuum that separated Leo Vance from the chaos erupting just beyond the tinted glass. Outside, the world had turned into a kaleidoscope of screaming strobe lights and frenzied voices, a sonic wall of adulation that vibrated against the car door. Inside, however, the air smelled of new leather and the faint, lingering scent of anxiety. Leo sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees. He was wearing a tuxedo, a real one this time, tailored to within a millimeter of perfection by a designer who had flown in from Milan just to measure his inseam. It didn't itch like the polyester livery of footman number 3. Felt like armor. "Are you ready?" The voice came from the seat opposite him. Elena looked different. Gone were the combat boots and the oversized flannels she wore on set like battle fatigues. Tonight, she was draped in midnight blue silk, her hair pinned up in a complex architecture that defied gravity. But behind the diamonds and the mascara, her eyes were the same, sharp, analytical, scanning him for cracks in the performance. "I don't know," Leo admitted, his voice low. He looked out the window at the blurred faces of the fans pressed against the barricades. "It feels excessive. For a job." "It's not for the job, Leo," Elena said softly, reaching across the chasm of the limo to adjust his bow tie, a motherly gesture that grounded him. "It's for the story. They aren't here for the movie. They're here for the Cinderella man, the shadow who stepped into the light. You're the narrative they want to believe in." Leo sighed. The narrative. The extra who became a star. It had been 6 months since that fateful afternoon in Studio 4, and the media machine had chewed up the details of his life and spat them out as a fairy tale. They glossed over the 20 years of failed auditions, the nights sleeping in his car, the crushing loneliness of the industry. They focused on the miracle of his discovery, conveniently ignoring the crime that had necessitated it. "Let's get it over with," Leo said. The driver opened the door, and the sound hit him like a physical blow. The roar of the crowd outside the Grauman's Chinese theater was deafening. Leo, over here. Look right. Look left." The flashes of the cameras were a blinding electrical storm, searing purple spots into his vision. Leo stepped out onto the red carpet. The crimson fabric under his dress shoes felt bizarrely soft, like walking on a tongue. He took a breath, finding his center, just as he had done in the closet in Sector B. This is just a scene, he told himself. Role the movie star. Objective, walk from point A to point B without tripping. Action. He moved with a grace that silenced the critics who had whispered that he was just a stunt-casting choice. He stopped for photos, turning his head slowly, offering a smile that was reserved, enigmatic. He wasn't playing the game the way Chase Sterling had played it, with desperate, toothy grinning and finger guns. Leo played it with stillness. He was an anchor in the storm. Isabella was waiting for him near the entrance. She looked radiant in gold, a visual callback to the film's title. When she saw him, her professional mask dissolved into a genuine grin. She bypassed the protocol, ignored the publicists trying to steer her toward Entertainment Tonight, and walked straight to Leo, taking his arm. "You clean up well, Lord Blackwood," she teased, squeezing his bicep. "You look dangerous, Elizabeth," he replied, slipping easily into their on-screen dynamic. "Ready to break some hearts?" "Only yours," she whispered. "Listen, don't let them rattle you. They're just sharks. You're the whale. You're too big to bite." They walked the gauntlet together. Reporters thrust microphones into his face like spears. Leo, is it true you improvised the final monologue? Leo, have you spoken to Chase Sterling? Leo, how does it feel to replace a legend?" Leo stopped at that last question. He looked at the reporter, a young man with hungry eyes. The crowd quieted down, sensing a soundbite. "I didn't replace anyone," Leo said, his voice calm and carrying over the noise without shouting. "I just stepped into a space that was empty. And as for legends, legends are stories we tell. I prefer the truth." He turned and walked away before they could ask a follow-up, leaving the reporters scrambling to record the quote. Inside the theater, the air was cool and smelled of expensive perfume and popcorn. The darkness of the auditorium was a relief. As the lights dimmed and the curtain rose, Leo sank into his seat. He hadn't seen the final cut. Elena had forbidden it, saying he needed to see it with an audience to understand what they had made. The screen flickered to life. The opening credits rolled. Directed by Elena Vance. No relation, a joke they had shared often. Starring Isabella Ross. And introducing Leo Vance. When his name appeared on the screen, a cheer went up from the back of the room. The crew, the grips, the electrics, the assistants who had been there that day. It was the only applause that mattered to him. Then the movie began, and for 2 hours Leo Vance disappeared. On the screen, Lord Blackwood was a figure of tragic, haunting beauty. The camera didn't just capture his face. It captured his thoughts. The scene 45, arrived like a thunderstorm. The audience seemed to stop breathing. On screen, Leo watched himself confront Isabella. He saw the restraint he had chosen that day. He saw the hand hovering, the trembling fingers, the decision to walk away rather than strike. It wasn't acting. It was a documentary of a human soul breaking in real time. He remembered the moment. He remembered the smell of the dust on the set, the heat of the lights, the ghostly presence of Chase Sterling's failure hanging in the air. He realized now that Chase had given him a gift. By stripping away the artifice, by forcing the production to the brink of disaster, Chase had created a vacuum where only the absolute truth could survive. When the credits rolled, the silence held for 3 long seconds. Then the ovation began. It started as a rumble and grew into a roar. People stood up. They turned toward him. He saw tears on faces. He saw Marcus, the producer, clapping so hard his hands looked red. The dollar signs in his eyes replaced, briefly, by genuine awe. Leo stood up, nodding awkwardly. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Elena. She was crying, silent tears tracking through her makeup. "We did it," she mouthed. After the screening, the after-party was held on the rooftop of the Roosevelt Hotel. It was a decadent affair, champagne flowing like water, a live jazz band playing soft standards. Leo navigated the room, shaking hands, accepting compliments that felt like they belonged to someone else. He found a quiet corner near the edge of the roof, looking out over the sprawling, glittering grid of Los Angeles. The city of angels, the city of liars. Hiding again? Leo turned. A man was standing there holding a glass of club soda. It was Detective Miller. He looked out of place in his cheap suit amidst the tuxedos, but he looked comfortable. "Old habits, Detective." Leo smiled. "Are you here to arrest me?" "Just providing security," Miller shrugged. "Though, honestly, I wanted to see the movie. My wife made me." He took a sip of his soda. "You were good, kid. Really good. Made me believe it." "High praise from a human lie detector," Leo said. Miller chuckled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "Speaking of lies, I thought you might want to see this. Came through the precinct today. It's public record now, but, well, nobody pays attention to the yesterday's news." Leo took the paper. It was a printout of a court docket. State of California versus Chase Sterling. Plea: guilty to petty theft and filing a false police report. Sentence: 500 hours of community service and mandatory rehabilitation. There was a photo attached, a mugshot taken recently. Chase looked different. His hair was undyed, showing gray at the roots. His face was puffy, stripped of the contouring and the filters. But his eyes looked clearer. The panic was gone. He looked like a man who had hit the bottom and found it solid enough to stand on. "He's working at a soup kitchen in Venice Beach," Miller said quietly. Scrubbing pots. I checked in on him. He told me it's the first honest work he's done in 10 years. Said he finally realized he's not a king. Leo stared at the photo. He felt a surge of complex emotion. Not pity, exactly, but a strange, distant kinship. They were both actors who had been trapped in roles they didn't fit. Chase trapped in the role of the star, Leo in the role of the extra. The explosion had freed them both. He kept the socks, Miller added. The socks. The wool socks he used to hide the necklace. He wears them to the soup kitchen. Says they remind him that even a diamond is just a rock if you have to hide it in dirty laundry. Leo folded the paper and handed it back. I hope he finds a new script, Leo said. Everyone deserves a second act. You're a better man than me, Miller nodded. Enjoy the party, Leo. You earned it. The detective walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Leo turned back to the view. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of jasmine and exhaust fumes. He felt a presence beside him. It was Elena again. She held 2 glasses of champagne, but she didn't offer him one. She just placed them on the ledge. I have something for you, she said. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small box. It wasn't velvet. It was cardboard, battered and taped together. Leo opened it. Inside lay the heart of the sea. Not the real one that was back in the museum vault. And not the paste replica that Chase had stolen. This was a new one. It was made of plastic beads and string, clumsy and colorful. My niece made it, Elena said, smiling. She saw the trailer. She said Lord Blackwood looked sad and needed a present. I figured, this one is probably worth more than the other 2 combined. Leo laughed. A genuine, belly-deep laugh that released the last of the tension from his shoulders. He took the plastic necklace and fastened it around his neck, over his bespoke tuxedo shirt. It looked ridiculous. It looked perfect. Fits, Leo said. Leo, Elena said, her tone turning serious. She looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow the reviews come out. The offers will start coming in. Marvel, DC, rom-coms. They're going to offer you the world. They're going to try to turn you into Chase. I know, Leo replied. Don't let them, she whispered fiercely. Don't let them put you back in the gilded cage. Stay in the closet if you have to. Stay in the dark. Keep the truth. Leo looked at her. He saw the reflection of the city in her glasses. Millions of lights, millions of stories. He thought about the boneyard, the dust, the smell of the prop room. He thought about the fear and the hunger. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he could never go back to being invisible, but he would never allow himself to become an illusion. He touched the plastic beads at his throat. I'm not looking for the spotlight anymore, Elena, Leo said softly. No? She asked. What are you looking for? Leo smiled, and it was the smile of Lord Blackwood. But it was also the smile of the man who had sat in the dark and found his voice. I'm looking for the work, he said. Just the work. Now, do you have the script for the next one? Or do I have to break into your office again? Elena laughed, clinking her glass against his plastic necklace. I have it, but you're not going to like it. It's a comedy, and you play a distinct lack of royalty. Perfect? Leo said, turning his back on the glittering skyline and walking back toward the party, back toward the noise, back toward the messiness of life. When do we start? The camera of his life pulled back, rising high above the hotel, above the flashing lights of the paparazzi who were still waiting for a glimpse of the star. But the star wasn't there. There was only a working actor, laughing with his director, ready to tell the next truth.